Hello and welcome to this episode of English with Matthew, where we're going to talk about using the pronoun I in an essay. Many of you have probably been told, don't do it. Well, we're going to talk it through, and it may turn out to be slightly more complicated than that, but I'll try to make it as simple as possible. Okay, we call that self-reference, and it could be referring to I, or me, or mine, or ours in the plural. It can also mean referring to the essay itself, like where you say in this essay. Those are all self-referring. You are referring to yourself. And some people have said really clearly, don't use these words in your essays. I, me, mine, our, ours, we, us, you, your, yours. And I'm just asking, really? Never? Can we not? Some people are so very sure about these things, I find those people a little hard to trust. Writing, like life, is complicated. Now, I'm going to try to simplify it for you. Writing, that is, not life. Okay? Let's boil this down the same way we boil all sentences down in order to make them as clear and direct as possible. The question we want to ask is, are you the subject of your sentence? In other words, are you what you are writing about? Because if you are, you may have to say I. But I'm going to guess no. Okay. It's not very often when we're writing an essay on a teaching methodology or a novel or a report that you yourself are what you need to talk about. It's unlikely. So self-reference asks that you double check, are you really the subject of your sentence, or have you just slotted I in unnecessarily? So look at this sentence here. I will discuss my school's teaching of numeracy and how they have used different approaches in recent years. That sentence is not really about I just threw that in to kind of stretch it out a bit. What is that sentence really about? Well, it's not really about I. Is it about my school? Maybe it's about my school's teaching. Let's keep looking. It's about the teaching of numeracy is what this sentence is about. People in the school? I think we've decided it's not really about them. Different approaches to teaching numeracy. That's what this sentence is about. It's about different approaches to the teaching of numeracy. Now, the school and I are not as important as that main topic. And the fact that it's in recent years, that may be of interest, but it's not the central point. So it looks like this will be a comparison of approaches to teaching numeracy. So name them and get on with it. Okay? Rather than starting with, I will discuss this, just talk about the different methods. So how about this? Maths mastery and problem-based learning are two different but overlapping approaches to the teaching of numeracy. Wow, that suddenly sounded a lot more authoritative because we put the right nouns up front in the sentence and we left I out of it. So do you see what I'm saying? Rather than just say, never use I, I'm trying to explain why we don't really need to use I very often. Because we're not the subject of the sentence. Okay. So we take that thing, I will discuss my school's teaching, and we get over the I in order to get to my school. It's like that I was a hurdle on our way to getting to the real subject of the sentence. Then we get to my school. The sentence isn't really about, it's not an article or an essay about my school. So we got to get over that. Then we get to numeracy. Now we're getting a bit closer. But what about numeracy? Then we've got they in there. Oh, these are a lot of hurdles on the way to the main point. Okay? So, it really is about approaches. And in the back of the writer's mind, they had a couple of approaches that they knew they were going to talk about, but they've put it off and put it off. And on revision, they really should know those need to go up front first. It's about the approaches. And they are two specific approaches, so name them. Don't go for that waffly, oh, there are many approaches. No, this is about two approaches. And it's also an argument about their relationship, because look at this. They're two different but overlapping. Oh, that's interesting. Fundamentally different, but they share some features. I'm interested to see where this essay is going to go. So I think that's all you need to know about using I in your academic writing. So you can switch off now and do something more interesting. But if you're a dedicated language person and you just can't get enough, I've thrown in a bit more context and perspective on the issue from here to the end. So, do we ever talk about ourselves in academic essays? It happens. Let me give you this example. This is from a book by an American academic, Kurt Spellmeyer, and it's part of his book, The Arts of Living, and it's a section called Could Teaching of All Things Prove to Be Our Salvation? And he says this at the very start. He says, just before noon on September 11th, 2001, while I was working at home on revisions to this book, my wife, Barbara, phoned to tell me that New York City was under siege. Of course, I thought she was joking, and like millions of Americans, I sat speechless as the World Trade Towers burned and fell again and again in endless televised replays. He is setting the context for his discussion and his analysis, and he's rooting it in a personal experience that is relevant. So it makes perfect sense in this very academic book that he should use the pronoun I. Plus, even in science, which are usually the people who really don't want you using I because they want things to seem kind of objectively scientific, those things are starting to change. Look at this course here, Eloquent Science, a course to improve scientific and communication skills. In that course, Dr. David M. Schultz concludes that first-person pronouns in scientific writing are acceptable if used in a limited fashion and to enhance clarity. So in other words, don't pepper your paper with I's and we's, but you don't have to rigidly avoid the first person either. Okay? So there is starting to be a little bit of give on this topic. It's a slowly changing convention in academia. Here's another article from the journal English for Specific Purposes. It just says, is academic writing becoming more informal? And they looked through, look at this, a corpus of 2.2 million words from the same leading journals in 4 disciplines. And what they discovered was there's only a small increase in the use of these features. And this is mainly accounted for by increases in the hard sciences, and it's restricted to increases in first-person pronouns, of all things. So there's not a lot of change, but the I is something that seems to be slightly more up for grabs. I'm just saying don't use it without there being a good purpose for using it or a point. So that myth of objectivity in science that we never say I, that is really starting to give way. This idea that in science we can trust because it's so objective. Because a lot of critics and scholars have said, well, look at science throughout history. It has come up with some pretty wacky theories. And here's one that was famous in the 19th century, that we can judge people by the shapes of their skulls. And this is how we come to the conclusion that certain ethnic backgrounds are less intelligent than those of a European origin. And, this is the kind of thing that sets up bias against people and encourage slavery. And this is why we have people taking to the streets now to fight basically what was bad science. So we're starting to question the objectivity of science, certainly. And Anne Fausto Sterling, who wrote this famous book, Myths of Gender, she goes at it to say it's not just race, but it's gender as well. Science for centuries has been very patriarchal in its focus and has come up with all kinds of theories about men and women that serve men rather well. Okay, so objectivity isn't all that it was cracked up to be in the scientific realm. And there's Anne Fausto Sterling herself, a fascinating academic. So there may be very good reason for you to use I in an essay, but generally, I doubt it. So don't use it without making a careful, reasoned judgment. Thank you for staying with me through this episode of English with Matthew and for joining me in the fight against unnecessary self-reference in essays. And I hope to see you again real soon. Thank you.